So, no warm up. We warmed up already.
Yeah, we warmed up. So, okay. 5, 4, 3,
Whoa.
2, 1.
Hello, everybody. It's Nikolai Papazov, one of the co-hosts of Before the Valley, which is a rather new show. And I'm here with Peter Petrov, just on the other side of the laptop. Yeah, hey. Who's the other co-host of the show. And it's a new experiment which we are doing ourselves. So, what other way to start it rather than introducing ourselves? Do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. Let's introduce ourselves. So, hello everyone. My name is Peter. Basically, I'm a graduate. I graduated university last year, King's College London, studied philosophy, politics, and economics. I'm currently working in digital marketing, but I also have my own startup. That's briefly in terms of me. What about you, Nikolai?
All right, yeah. So, before introducing myself, because I think it would be interesting for the audience. I assume that initially it's gonna be mainly our friends who are listening to this podcast. But even though for them, what was this transition from philosophy, economy, to digital marketing? How come?
Okay, so where should I begin?
You have 20 seconds to say it. Whatever it is, just give me the best of it. The key reason behind this change.
Yes, so initially when I entered university, I wasn't sure what I want to do. That's why I chose a very broad degree, which also had practical elements, economics. And then I started my startup with you, actually. Interesting. We created our startup during the second year, which is dealing with digital marketing. And then I found a passion for this, and that's why I'm in digital marketing now. And I find a lot of the stuff that I actually studied at university, especially in economics, I find it very useful for my job now. So that's briefly why I transitioned into digital marketing.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. All right, then about myself.
Tell us.
I'm still a student, third year student. I have 1 or 2 more months left, which is quite interesting. Afterwards, the real world is coming. I'm studying management with accounting and finance, so I'm passionate about finance as well as entrepreneurship business. And I think that's briefly about me. My passions describing pretty well entrepreneurship and finance, and a person with a lot of interest about self-development and trying to become better on a daily basis in order to be able to achieve the success which I hope that eventually will come,
Sure, yeah, that sounds good. Well, so you're graduating now, so it's quite interesting for me what your next step is gonna be. I know we are in a bit of a volatile environment where everything could happen, but I assume, since I know you and my assumptions should be reasonable, I assume that you have several options to go for. So can you tell me the main ones? What are the next steps in front of you?
The first, which is, I hope, gonna come no matter what, is to move to London, because I'm currently in Manchester, for those of you that don't know. Afterwards, my long-term ambition is rather, either having my own business, which is one of the things that I'll try to focus on after coming to London. And the other one is it's a pretty long-term one, but if business doesn't work, like my own business, go into venture capital, which means that I have several plans before that, but I don't think that it's going to be that interesting for the audience to hear about them now. These are the next steps. It's a bit unclear, especially now with the with COVID-19, because any plans that I had, they're no longer on the table, and I have to adapt, which is part of the real journey of an entrepreneur.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of people that listen to us or watch us can associate with this, because it's a very risky and volatile environment, and no one knows what's gonna happen. So
but on the other hand, it's risky, volatile. But here I am with you doing something that I thought that I wouldn't do now. It was something that I was planning at some point in my life, but I thought that it's a good time to start a podcast because I had more free time. And trying to make the most out of the volatility and the uncertainty.
Yeah, and okay, that sounds good. And why did you choose to spend your time doing a podcast specifically? Or to rephrase, why are you doing the podcast?
Yeah, I mean, that's for the audience, that's a question which we thought about before. It's not something that Peter is just throwing.
It's something in advance.
We prepared for this in advance, but there are a couple of reasons behind me doing a startup. Yeah, it's a podcast which we today.
Oh, it is a startup. I agree.
Yeah,
it is a startup,
we describe it as a startup, but one of the main reasons is that we want to develop our communication skills. Communication skills are crucial in the business world, in on a daily basis, you're communicating with people. As Chris Voss is saying on this masterclass promotion, you're dealing with people, negotiating, like when you go to Starbucks, like you're negotiating. So like speaking for 40 minutes, 1 hour while doing these podcasts is a good way to practice communication skills. And we're going to learn how to hopefully structure our approach and how to convey ideas in a very, very concise and proper way, which is crucial. I don't know, you agree?
Yeah, I agree completely with you. And it's mainly, for me at least, as well, it's mainly learning that way. I think it's crucial in business. It's crucial to be a good public speaker. Like you're going to go for, we are going to go for funding at one point or another. So we need these skills. We need to present our product well in front of restaurants, for example, because we are dealing with in the restaurant sector. So all of this, like sales skills, stuff like that, require good articulation and presentation skills and being captivating, like making people listen to you, being interesting.
Yeah.
So I think that's the main reasons for me as well. And like on this, that being the main reason for us starting the podcast, it also makes it a bit, I guess, chiller, because we are not going for, a great successful podcast necessarily. But of course, the success of this podcast would reflect the improvement of our skills. So
yeah, I agree. And like just to add to this, something quite important. And I think that something that all the listeners is going to be useful for them to hear. Why are we doing this and what are we actually trying to do? Because there are so many podcasts out there. Is that we, as people that are constantly following successful people and what are they doing, how they became so successful, we many times questioned, okay, so what was Elon Musk doing while being 22, 23 on a daily basis? Like, what was his daily lifestyle from waking up to going to bed? And there's almost nothing about most of these successful people. So we thought that, okay, that's a niche which is still uncovered, quite an interesting one. And we thought that as people who aspire to become successful entrepreneurs, we're going to cover it. We're going to follow our daily lifestyles, our routines, our habits. What are we trying to improve? And try to come up with a formula or like a secret to success, to say it this way. And,
Yes, and it's more of, I guess, uncovering the details of progressing, because success is a very subjective concept. Like for one, it could be becoming a billionaire. For other, it could be like helping people with in a very niche environment. So I think us making progress would be a good indicator. It will show people what works and what doesn't. And also, I guess another main reason for us doing the podcast is us learning and asking questions each other and discussing these topics. It would be very useful for people that associate with our position as well. People who want to develop, want to create something, and have questions, and they want to ask the questions and learn. So I guess that's the main reasons for doing it. Yeah, and it's also a good experiment, I think.
I agree. Like experiment is the word which came to my mind now. Like thinking about all of this is that we are recording all of this, trying to improve ourselves on a daily basis, trying to become better for our next steps, whether that's business or career-wise. And eventually, at some point when we achieve success, as you said, which is a relative term, we're going to be, hopefully we do that, but we're going to be able to go back to these recordings if we stop doing them, and see, okay, this is actually working. You know, what we did worked, and it is what led to us being successful. And it's something that many people who afterwards aspire to become successful in the way they want to are going to be able to go back to, like the podcast, and say, okay, these guys did this, like these guys did that, and I'm going to implement it so that I can be successful. But an important thing, just to say something, is that we're not giving advice, but rather following our journey. And based on that journey, people can learn different things, because we're not like a book saying, okay, this, you have to learn this structure and that. We're just following what we do and what works for us.
Yeah, exactly. And what's interesting for us as well. I wanted to say also that looking at it the other way around, it will also highlight the fact that we don't want to give advice or, I guess, lecture anyone. Even if we fail, the experience is going to be useful for people, because they would know, okay, these guys did
failed
this, but they failed miserably. So even the failures would be a good learning experience. And even if it's not a mass of people, I'm thinking even for my children, like, why did my father fail? Okay, well,
listen to this podcast.
Or why did my grandfather fail, as a matter of fact?
Yeah.
Well, family is a success on its own, so then I'm not a failure probably. But anyway, let's continue. This brings us to the name of the podcast.
Yeah.
Before the Valley. Why are we calling it Before the Valley? And it's very interesting, actually. It's very interesting because what we thought is, what's the symbol of modern success? But not just success, but providing value, being on the edge of innovation, and aspiring to create a better future. What's the symbol of this? And we came to the conclusion that the Silicon Valley is probably the best symbol of all of that. And that's why we thought, okay, the Silicon Valley. We obviously aren't Silicon Valley level yet CEOs, but we aspire to be. That's why the podcast is called Before the Valley. And yeah, I think that also is very personal for us, just because we both get inspired a lot by CEOs at Silicon Valley. We are interested in what's happening there and how people are working there. So it's also personal for us, which I think is also quite valuable.
Yeah. Like, quick comment. I think that it would be good if you stop tapping on your desk, because afterwards, like, the people are gonna be
sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good comment. I'm sorry. I'm a bit nervous at the moment, I would say, but also excited. Yeah. So that's probably why I'm a bit more lively.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a good comment. But
we did like three warm-ups, and we did like one.
No, you don't have to say that. You don't have to say that. Yes, this is basically the third time we are recording this. But just to excuse ourselves, every time we are adding a bit more from ourselves, so it's more valuable for you as well this way.
It's more personal.
So yeah, but this is also true, and also an important point I wanna bring up, and that is why people listening to this podcast should also start a podcast themselves. And it's pretty much on the back of the reasons that we just mentioned. If you want to improve your communication skills, become more captivating, better presenter, better persuader, what's the best way to do that? I think that's watching yourself from the outside. What do you think about it? Like, what do you think about people starting a podcast in this competitive environment? Because we discussed this before that, but it's good for the listeners and for me to understand you better. Yeah,
I agree. Like, the main point is learning, and now you just learned one thing, that when you speak in front of people, sometimes you don't realize that you're doing some movements and stuff which might lead to worse understanding or to, some technical issues in this case. But the main thing, at least for us now, is that through a podcast we can improve ourselves, we can learn a lot, communicating with each other, we can get to know each other better, which is crucial when it comes to startups and to building companies. And you never know, as we did in one of the one of the recordings, we said that after getting to know each other better, we might end up not being partners at all. So that's the downside of it. But I think that through podcasting and stuff, you can get to know yourself better after watching, afterwards the recording, to analyze yourself. This is something that Tim Ferriss was saying, like, if you want to improve your communication skills, record yourself, watch it afterwards. You're going to be able to see where your flaws are, which sometimes are not that clear when you're speaking or doing something. So this is probably the main reason for now. At some point, if we become successful, hopefully, Tim Ferriss level, Joe Rogan level, all of these big podcasts, we're going to have a proper startup from this. But that's not the main ambition for now, I would say.
Yeah, and I think regressing back to how we originally started, I think that could be the case for a lot of people as well. If you want to start a podcast, I think that's why we are starting the podcast. That's why I'm involved in this. If you want to start a podcast currently and you don't know what you're going to talk about, you don't know the angle you're going to approach topics from, you don't know what, if anything you're going to talk about is even interesting, just do it. Just do it for your own improvement, especially if you want to be an entrepreneur and start something on your own, provide value for people. I think that's the main idea behind it. And go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's not a big thing, but speak about stuff that you like, that you enjoy. We're speaking like this, not recording on a daily basis. With Casper, with our friends and stuff, we're constantly speaking about self-development, about interesting topics in the tech business world, about finance, everything. So we said, all right, let's record it. Let's see what the feedback from people is, and try to make it to have a bit more of a commitment to it, which would make it probably more useful, I would say.
Yeah, it will push us as well. And that's a good point. I think if you start your own podcast, the feedback you're gonna get from people is as useful as you watching yourself from the outside, because people, I think, would be more willing to tell you the mistakes you're making while you're communicating, which might not be the case if they are speaking directly to you, because that's never the topic of conversation. But if you're creating a podcast, then they might focus on, okay, you can do this better, you can do this, I like this, this made me laugh. And that way you can improve. And speaking of journaling, I think it's a good transition to our first topic. What do you say?
Yeah, to show to people like kind of what we're going to be speaking about during this podcast, and especially on the self-development side. Yeah, I think that's a good thing, especially mentioning that podcasting is kind of a journaling. And journaling is something that we've been doing for quite some time now, right?
Yeah, a few months for me. Well, it's not too much, but I've noticed the utility of journaling.
But did you start
in such a short period of time? So
did you start journaling a few months ago, like proper journaling, following your daily schedule? Didn't you do it before that?
Last summer, I decided to take the action. I think that's when I also started paying more attention to podcasts and stuff, and I was just inspired by people like Jordan Peterson and Tim Ferriss. I'm not sure if I listened to Tim Ferriss back then, but it's basically I found it very useful, and thought I could try it myself and actually apply and see if it is actually useful. And that's why we're also talking about it today, just because we both thought it's quite useful. But it was about a year ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So
what about you? When did you start?
I think you started. To be honest, I'm like to be doing proper journaling on a daily basis and to be very consistent with it. I've started after coming here to the UK, because life here is so dynamic that if you are not at least for me, if I was not following what I have to do and what I want to do, I was gonna get lost, to be doing everything very chaotically. So I think this is when I started properly. But something interesting, and I have something to show you here, is that I started journaling back home in Bulgaria when I was I don't know, it's quite late for the standards of self-development, in today's world. I was, I think, 15, 16, something like that. And I remember that it's probably from some videos or some, the first book that about business, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. This must have been the book. But I decided...
The classic.
Yeah, a classic one. But I was wait, hold a minute, like I'm learning all of this, but you know, I'm reading about all of this, but then afterwards I don't remember anything few weeks afterwards. So I thought, okay, I want a proper like way to be journaling, and I went to buy you call it a notebook, right? Like the way you journal.
I think, yeah, there's like special notebooks for this, yeah.
Yeah, so like I wanted to buy a notebook, and I struggled a lot to find the best one, but I went to buy it with the idea that one day I'm gonna show it to people and I'm gonna say, look, this is where I put my first thoughts, and but like from the point of view of somebody who's successful. So I kind of had this
so
ambition. Weird. Yeah, and
do you know, now I remember I did the same thing. Remember. Genuinely, I genuinely did the same thing. I had a folder. My dad was, what I was doing. Do you know, I saw it from a friend. He was doing that. I was just like, oh wow, maybe I should try this as well.
Oh wow.
So I remember I was using these like big white sheets of paper, and I was just like noting down stuff, and then I was putting it in a folder. Remember my dad saying like, what the fuck are you doing? What are you doing? Because I was still maybe like 13 years old. I was like 7
so you started quite young. Nice.
But it wasn't for self-improvement. It was just like, it was interesting for me. And
put some notes.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe I in the future I'm gonna go back to it. So that's what I remembered about this when you said that you thought that in the future you're gonna go back to it. So I thought the same thing. I don't know where they are, but it's pretty similar. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me go back to my point of my first journal.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Something very interesting is that the first line in this journal is from you.
No.
Because
how come? Why?
This is the journal. You see?
Yeah.
That's the journal. And I remember that we met at McDonald's, and
right.
Oh no, okay, it's not from you. I wrote it myself, but we like it's based on a conversation with you. We were discussing about trading and stuff, about investing, and you were explaining to me what's bid-ask spread, and like I don't remember what properly we discussed, but you can see here that, wait, can you see or no? It's basically saying Apple.
Yeah, I think so.
Apple sale price and Apple buy price. And what's the difference between this? And
bro, I think I remember this. I was at that point I was selling stocks. I remember like buying and selling stocks.
Selling stocks with your pocket money of like £5 or what?
No, bro, my dad invested in me. I got a small loan of I don't know, maybe 1,000 left.
Really?
And yeah, but it was less. It was like 300 left.
That's still a lot for back then, like.
Yeah, it is. And he was like, just like try not to, you know,
like Warren Buffett
lose it all.
Yeah, Warren Buffett's rules. Rule 1, don't lose money. Rule 2, go back to rule 1. You know. So you got this advice from a young age.
Yeah. But I lost it all, so never mind that. And then.
So what's mentioning Warren Buffett? I know that you have a pretty good story that I think many people would find interesting. Do you want to share it? Like, what's like the main motivation behind you starting to do journaling properly, and especially recently?
Yeah, sure. So I'm gonna like, first of all, a bit of context on this. So we're gonna speak about journaling and note taking in the context of setting a direction for yourself and being focused on what's important and reducing noise. So here's my bullet journal. So how I started this, like, I'm gonna go top to bottom. So what I mean by this is how I set direction for myself, and then what I do on a daily basis. So what I did is I've done it a few times now. I think might be 2 times, because as I said, I'm taking notes for about 8 to 9 months, maybe 10. But I've seen a huge improvement in my work and the way I do stuff. So Warren Buffett, he had his this pilot called Mike Flint. So Mike Flint was Buffett's personal pilot for quite a lot of time, and obviously Buffett, being the person he is, he noticed that this person is not improving. He's not moving forward. He's just remaining in the same position. So he decided to speak with Flint. So he went to Flint and ask him, why are you not following your dreams? What's going on? Like, you're not going out there just like chasing stuff, but you're remaining a pilot for me all the time. And then I think he first asked him about what his dreams are, what he wants to do. So what he told him to do is basically get a list of 25 things he wants, 25 dreams, if you wish. It might not even be dreams. It might be goals. It might be things you want to improve. 25 things you wanna chase. You wanna succeed in. So that was his way of finding out what Flint wanted to do, and also give him a lesson. Why give him a lesson? I'll now explain. So Flint wrote down. Okay, he thought about it. Okay, I want this, and this. 25 items in that list. 25 items. Next step, Buffett told him, is to erase 20 of them. Just erase them. Just put a line over them and choose 5. Choose the 5 that you want the most at this current stage of your life. So Flint obviously did that and remained with 5 items.
It's about prioritizing your goals. Like, this is what he did, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's basically choosing. It's choosing. These are top priority. The 20 rest are what he thought is they are lower priority. Yeah. But that's where he was mistaking. So yeah, Buffett basically asked him, okay, Mike, so you chose these 5. They are obviously the things you want the most, but what you're gonna do with the other 20? And then Flint said, yeah, these are my top priorities, so I'll focus mostly on them. I'll work on them. I'll even start tonight. But the other 20, I am also gonna pay some attention to. I'm gonna spend some time because there's a close second. So I still wanna achieve those things. Yeah. That's the interesting bit of the story. That's what's so interesting is. That at this point Buffett told him, no, that's what you shouldn't do. These 20 items that you just erased, that you just crossed, should be your avoid at all cost list. So what that means is you shouldn't focus on them, you shouldn't spend time on them, you should just focus on these 5 items that you've chosen. Because if you spread yourself through too many tasks and too many of these items, you're not going to be able to achieve any of them. And that's also, now I'm thinking, do you remember the story of Bill Gates? I think it was Bill Gates' dad asking Buffett and Gates, because Buffett and Gates are good friends. What made you successful? What if you had to describe success in one word, what would it be? So they wrote it down on a piece of paper, and then when they both showed it,
it was focus.
Both pieces of paper, it was focus without them communicating at all. So for both of them, it was focus. And this brings back to this story where focus is most important. And I did the same thing. 25 list, then 5 items. And I chose my 5 items. And that's how I started. That's how I set my direction. 5 things I want to do. 5 things I'm going to focus on specifically and work on every day. So that's, I guess, the overall.
All right. And from this experience, what has been the hardest thing to do? Has it been like sticking to your goals? Like how are you trying to achieve them on a daily basis? Like, how are you following if you're actually working towards achieving these goals? Is it something else? Like, what has been the greatest challenge? And also coming up with this 25 goals, because 25 is quite a lot, 25 it's probably something that, like, a number that you're gonna achieve toward your life. So you thought about this now. So
yes. I mean, people that know me probably know I have a very difficult time choosing stuff, especially making like small choices.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it was but I guess it's practice, and this was this was also practice. How I did it is, first coming up with them was quite difficult, because that was one of your questions. What was the most difficult thing? Obviously, 25 is a lot, so you have to think about back when you were a child. Okay, what did I want when I was a child? What do I want now? What's something that I want but maybe never thought about starting? Or like this, like podcast, for example, was something I always wanted to do, but never thought about starting.
Was it within those 5 goals or no?
That's what I was gonna say. No, it wasn't. It wasn't on the list. So I'm not flawless, okay? I'm not flawless.
No. Look, like here, the interesting thing is that what we said, you're trying to make the most out of the current situation, because if
it's true. That's true.
If things were going normal, you would probably have prioritized something else rather than a podcast. So now the podcast came into all of this rather than you delaying and waiting. Okay, like I can chill a bit and relax.
It's also something else. It's also the podcast in this way is not the final goal.
Yeah.
The podcast is the instrument. Me improving my communication skills, let's say, articulation skills. That's the instrument I'm doing it through. It's not the goal. But if we succeed, it's a bonus, of course.
Yeah. So it's something that's gonna help you achieve your 5 goals. So.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, interesting.
Yes. And I guess if you can mix them along the way, that's even better. And I think the podcast was the best way to improve public speaking and presentation skills. So
now,
it was the best match. Yeah. Now, of course, now.
Yeah, it was like we should have either been speaking about different topics, just chatting on the phone, or you speaking with any like kind of a person that answers your calls, or us doing a podcast. So kind of like improving ourselves, but at the same time trying to show it to more people, gather more feedback. Like this is probably more helpful.
Yes. I agree completely. So that was your first question. How did I choose? And obviously, it's not so cut and dry if we are making the podcast, but you reach the 5 goals, and choosing them was quite difficult as well. But it was more of a what have I wanted consistently throughout my life, and not want, let's say, this year or last year or a few years ago. It's what I wanted consistently, and these were things that I like since I was growing up. I wanted to do. Well, another of your questions was what do you do then after that?
Yeah. So and what are the challenges in, like, setting up your goals is something that many people do, like New Year resolutions and stuff. But afterwards, not many manage to keep up with all these goals. So how is it going, and is it hard?
Well, so first of all, in the context of note taking, if these are things that you really want, then you're probably not gonna change. They're not gonna change that easily. So even if you don't work on them, they still won't change. So they're still there. It's every time you open the diary, you still see the same things you want.
Yeah.
And then you see, okay, what did I do the last 3 days? Nothing. And then you realize you're not working towards what you want. So that's in the context of note taking, I guess, seeing what you're doing on a daily basis. And if that takes you closer to these goals is something that pushes you to, I guess, follow the initial plan and just like try to do stuff that are gonna get you there. But how do you get to this plan? So something interesting. How I do it, at least that's my system, is I create a 6-month plan, like what I want to do what I want to get to in 6 months, and then a monthly plan as well. So each month I'll set myself objectives that I want to do this month. So the goal is, each month to get closer to the 6-month goals, and then the 6-month goals are gonna take me closer to the
long term
overall ones. Yeah, which I came up with the Warren Buffett method. It's also interesting, something to mention. The Warren Buffett list is a perfect example of Pareto's law, the 80-20 law, which is so basically, for those of you who don't know, Pareto is an economist who realized that 20% of the population have 80% of the wealth. And then after that, he realized that I think it was 80% of the peas in his garden, 20% of the peas in his garden give out the 80% of output, the 80% of actual food. So he found this law that 20% of the input brings out 80% of the output. And this is a perfect example of this list of Warren Buffett, because 5 out of 25 is 20%.
Yeah.
So if you choose 20% of your goals, of your goals, you're gonna get 80% of the meaning in your life, the 80% of happiness in your life, the 80% of feeling fulfilled in your life.
Yeah.
So that's why you can focus on these 5 things. That's Pareto's law. And then, as I said, I have a deadline. I set myself a 6-month and a 1-month deadline, which brings me to Parkinson's law, which is basically states that the complexity of a task increases with the time you spend on that task. So a bigger deadline means a task gets more complex. For example, if you have an essay if you set yourself a deadline of 1 week, you're probably gonna focus on the most essential stuff. Sorry, I'm tapping again on my table. You're probably gonna focus on the most essential stuff, and the task of completing the essay gets simpler.
Yeah.
So there's a good synergy between the two laws, Pareto and Parkinson, because if you set yourself tight deadlines, then the complexity of the tasks becomes less. So you focus on the essential stuff. So you focus on the 20% you need to focus on, and then you get to 80% of the output. But then you can complete more tasks, setting yourself tighter deadlines, and complete 20% of this task, 20% of the next task, and do a lot more than you would otherwise do. So there's a good synergy between them. That's why I do a 6 month and a monthly planning, setting myself a deadline, and then on a daily basis, I just I think on the daily tasks that are gonna get me closer to finishing my monthly tasks. So for example, a monthly task would be create 4 episodes of the podcast. So on a daily basis, I will think on the content, hire a designer for our thumbnail and stuff, and then moving on closer to that monthly task. It could be improve your articulation skills through the podcast, for example. It could be like more personal stuff. So that's my system.
This was a long answer. Hopefully people got to, grasp the idea. But I think that the key thing, apart from being focused on 20% of the stuff that you want, is that you're breaking your main goals into smaller actions that you need to do on a daily basis, which is keeping you somehow, committed to it. You're responsible for achieving your goals. As you said, when you open that journal, or like whatever you put your goals, it could be on a big calendar which you put on your wall. You're gonna know what you need to achieve, and you're gonna have it broken down into each step, which to some extent makes it easier to comprehend. Because I think that this is a principle from the Getting Things Done book, that the key thing that people don't get right is that they have a deadline or whatever, and they don't set the next mini step which is needed in order to get a bit closer, which is why they're like, oh, I have this deadline, I'm gonna delay it a bit, I don't know how to start, so they don't do it at all. But if they had like the small step of like, okay, open your Word document, type your title, and plan your next steps, this is like much easier. You have this clarity, which to some extent makes it makes it better structure.
I think it removes the anxiety as well of writing stuff, because you always have the anxiety. Okay, but so what was your experience with journaling?
Well, like, to be honest, I've tried different ways of journaling. Because the main idea is that, as I told you, I felt that life here is very dynamic, so I wanted to do more stuff in the time that I have, 24 hours or however you have after you remove that sleep. But I wanted to do as much as I can and be as efficient as possible and do the main things. So I tried bullet journaling. I tried afterwards bullet journaling, which was more advanced because I was putting some thoughts. I was putting, proper journaling after the day. I had a quote which I said, okay, this is a good way to do it. It's a pretty good way to do it. However, it was too time consuming, to be journaling on a daily basis, to be getting this quote for the day. And I felt to myself, this is too much. So I stopped doing it. So this was like a trial and error thing. Then I tried time boxing. I don't know if you know it, but like I've watched several videos on YouTube. It's and Matt Davea, like the minimalist guy. He's also explaining it. I think it's something that Elon Musk also uses, that you block time slots within your day for different activities. Let's say lunch, 1 hour, meeting with Peter, 2 hours, and you structure your day in a way that gives you a clear idea of what you need to do, and you stick to that. However, once again, I felt it's too requiring from me to be sticking to it. I had to constantly go back to it and change some stuff. And currently what I'm doing, and I've been doing it for several months, I think, is again bullet journaling. And I found it personally for me as the most efficient and the way through which I've been the most consistent. Because
I see.
It's not very complex. every night before I go to sleep or every morning, the first thing that I do, or if I go to sleep, the last thing that I do is set up what I have to do the next day. And afterwards, I have the whole flexibility to achieve it or to do it whenever I want. Of course, I think about when is the most convenient time to do several different things. So I think that for me, this has worked the best until now. Because as I told you, it's not that, how should I say it? It doesn't require too much from me. It just gives me an idea of what I have to achieve in order to achieve those long-term goals.
Yeah, I see what you mean. So would you say that your approach was, I guess you were trying to become more efficient, so you didn't set your goals long-term, but rather just started doing it day by day? Do you think that's the better way to do it? Was it that? Do you think that's, because I think that might be easier for people that are watching currently, just to start without doing this whole system I'm talking about, starting with setting goals and stuff. It might be even better to just put down 6 things I'm gonna do today, then repeat it the next day, then the next day, and then build up a sort of a habit.
It depends, I would say. As we said, we're not giving advice, so I'm not sure if that's the best way to do it.
For you, do you think
for me, I've had friends who've asked me, how do you keep up with everything? How do you do your stuff on a daily basis? And I said, I just keep track of what I have to do. And just being more efficient is probably one of the key ideas behind journaling. Because otherwise, if you're not journaling, as we already said, you're gonna get lost. You're gonna be doing so many stuff that eventually you're not gonna be doing anything. And I think that's the key idea. And afterwards, if you that's the most simple idea. As I said, because for me personally, when I did this, it worked initially, but afterwards I tried to improve it by making it more complex, which didn't work. So I think that, as you said, it was a good way for me to start. And afterwards, I've tried to incorporate different things, different bits here and there in order to improve my system. So one of them is to have a long-term perspective of why am I doing certain things.
Right, I see. So that exactly, yeah. So your approach is, first you started doing this very simple thing, which I guess build the habit, and then you could improve on it after you build up the routine to do that.
And I want to add something which I think is quite interesting, is that related to your idea of setting 25 goals or 5, which is what you're left with. But having those 5 goals, even if you don't follow them strictly on a daily basis, I think that unconsciously you're thinking about them. And you're kind of more focused to achieve them. Because I remember last summer that I set myself 10 things that I want to achieve during the summer, because I didn't manage to get a proper internship before the summer. So I had more free time, and I said, okay, it's time to develop, it's time to improve, get better, so that next year I manage to achieve what I want. And I think that I didn't follow them on strictly, if my actions fit with those goals. But eventually I achieved 80% of them. So unconsciously, yes. I was focused on, even my daily tasks, which I was putting in my diary, my journal, they were targeted towards these long-term goals.
Yeah, I guess it's about setting a direction. And then even if you miss track of it all in 2 weeks, you already built the habit of doing things that get you closer to that goal that you set yourself to do. So for example, an example of this would be, I want to work, let's say I want to work in, Google. So to work in Google, what it usually requires is for you to be in marketing. It's a huge advantage. If you work with their platform, if you know what's up there, it helps you with the interview later. So if I start working on, let's say, projects that are on their platform, on AdWords, if I start doing that on a daily basis, I might not keep in mind that I want to work in Google all the time, but I've already built the habit initially of working on projects, doing digital marketing, working in that sector. So because I built the habit and I continued with it, at one point, it fits perfectly with the objective I've set myself initially. So it's about building the habits as well, I guess. Also, something very interesting you mentioned is that when people ask you how do you do all of this, you mentioned that you're basically eliminating chaos in that way. You're just keeping track of what you want to do. And I think a journaling system is very good for is very good for eliminating noise as well.
Yeah.
Getting back to the Pareto principle, but I have a why section as well. So anytime I put something in my notebook as a daily task while journaling, I would have a why section explaining why I do it. And initially, like before even writing down the task, if I cannot explain why, I usually skip it, or I don't even think about things which I can explain why I'm doing.
You skip your task?
No, I don't even write it. Like I think, for example, I set myself, okay, what I want to do today, start thinking on things, and then I might be like, okay, I don't need to do this just because
It doesn't. Yeah.
I cannot put anything reasonable below the why section. And it might be a good idea to actually show it. It's very. So what is a bullet journal? I won't show the tasks, but I'll just show.
Yeah. Is it gonna be clear on the camera though?
Have no idea. I'll just like.
We can include a picture of it in the video itself for those of you that are watching the videos.
We can probably do that as well, yeah. But it's like just like the date, then you put in why, and then you put in your tasks as bullet points. There's a lot of like YouTube videos which are also very helpful.
Yeah, but like there's so many YouTube videos that if you start scrolling through all of them, you're gonna get confused. So I would say like experimenting and trying stuff, probably starting with, like this principle of what if I do this for 1 month? You're not dedicating too much of your time. You're not focused only on doing journaling, but what if I do it for 1 month, just a test? You're not going to lose anything. You have to set this benchmark of when this is like diminishing the returns of doing the exercise.
Yeah, it's similar to you with the time box. You tried it. You saw you're not as efficient as you thought you would be, so you changed it.
Yeah, and however, I didn't give up after doing it for a few days. Like I tried to be a bit consistent, but it didn't fit with my daily lifestyle and stuff. So it wasn't the right thing for me, at least back then. Because being a student, your daily routine is much more flexible and you have much more freedom. So it depends on that as well, I would say. Because I think that I don't have the experience. You might comment on this, but if you're working, you can probably have a big time box which is saying work like 8 hours or however long it is, and afterwards you can have a small section which is time boxed properly. I don't know.
Yeah, I see.
If that's true though.
Yeah. So another question I have on this is, would you say you improve through this? Would you say your results improve? Like, do you see you, I don't know, focusing on the right stuff? Because I would say yes, but I'm just interested.
No, like I don't think that it's possible to have so much negative effect of journaling, because as I said, it's not something that requires so much of your time. And I don't know if you remember, but I had this period in my life when I wasn't very reliable. Like people were asking me to make payouts in the company about, let's say, referrals and stuff. And I was delaying them because I didn't keep track of anything. So I was like, shit, I forgot to do it. I'm going to do it now. So I think that now this is helping me to keep track of all of this stuff. Like even those stuff that are not very impactful, but I have to do it. And doing them leaves much more freedom about doing the important stuff, I would say. And, like if I'm constantly thinking about paying out referrals or anything that is pretty basic, I would lose capacity of my brain and stuff to be thinking about more important things.
Yeah. Your brain is not the place for all of this. Yeah. It's better to have it on a
even
No, I'm not kidding. I can't remember where I listened to this recently, but it was just like, it was a productivity specialist. He was just like, note down everything you have, because otherwise you will get overwhelmed.
It could be from getting things done if you listen to this podcast, because this is no,
I think it was Tim Ferriss.
Yeah.
It was definitely
like,
maybe
he has a podcast with this guy, like with getting things done, which was interesting. That while I was reading the book, like Tim. Oh, thank you, Tim. Like I'm not gonna read. I'm not gonna read the book now.
Fuck the book now. Just like burn it.
No, because it was from the library, so I couldn't burn it.
Oh, you could, because you had to pay after. I see.
Yeah. So I think that we've been discussing note taking for some time now, and I think that we gave a pretty good idea to our audience of what we're going to be discussing. So I would say that we can kind of enter the stage of closing the first podcast, which is quite romantic, you know. It was hard to start it. We had to start it 3 times.
Bro, it's not a date. It's not a date. I keep telling him it's not a date. We're just talking about stuff.
Yeah, okay. All right, okay.
Yeah, so anyway, I think that's a good example episode. I don't know if it's good. Probably in 10 episodes I'll be like, what the fuck were we doing? But it's our
Most
first
probably.
episode, so yeah, I hope that was useful for you guys, and it was a interesting experience for us. An interesting conversation. I wouldn't say that much because it's stuff that we have talked before. So maybe in the future we can discuss more stuff that we don't know much about. But as I said, we are staying in our comfort zone, trying to just be as good as we can in this first episode, and then build on this, hopefully.
I wouldn't say it's a comfort zone. Like, how is the comfort zone?
Definitely isn't.
We're speaking to interesting thing.
We're speaking to millions of people.
No, like one day this podcast is gonna be listened hopefully by millions of people. You know, it's gonna have millions of downloads. It's gonna be the #1 podcast on iTunes and stuff.
Hopefully.
The stuff that you hear in every single podcast. But something interesting is that both of us, we've been doing YouTube like 10 years ago, probably. Right? It's about that time. So doing this podcast and recording a video right now, I feel like I'm to some extent entering again this zone of recording and filming videos, but I feel much more relaxed. And it could be, of course, that I'm doing it with you, that I'm not speaking to the camera solely. But that's a kind of a thing that journaling and stuff has helped me to some extent to speak freely in front of a camera, and especially when it comes to showing myself to other people.
Yeah. I think I can't really compare it to my previous experience, but I would say this was a chill experience. Well, not that chill, because it's a new experience. I was a bit nervous, to be fair, initially.
Yes,
but yes,
same. Like,
were you nervous as well?
Yeah, like
initially, or?
I still am. Like, I don't know if things are going well. Like, you tapping on that desk, I was like, come on, like, stop doing it.
But anyways, let's close on this. Let's close on this. So this was the first episode. I hope.
What are your final?
Valuable.
What's gonna be the summary of this episode?
Do you know what the summary of this episode can be summarized with this quote I have in my journal, because we're talking about journaling.
Nice.
It's the quote on the first page of my journal.
Oh, so you didn't prepare it today?
What's that?
You didn't prepare it today. The quote.
No, it wasn't prepared.
All right,
today, no,
interesting.
No. It's something I try to not live by, but consider all the time.
This is gonna be deep then.
Think about every single day. So the quote is by Will Durant, and people often think it's by Aristotle because he was quoting, or he was explaining what Aristotle is trying to say in an essay or a book, I think. But it's by Will Durant, and we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. And I think that is a good summary for a journaling podcast first episode.
Because journaling is going to help you be consistent and achieve this excellence, I would say.
Yes, a habit.
Yeah.
Excellence is a habit.
Right. So, so this was the first episode of Before the Valley. Let's now, we're going to see if it went well. We're going to check it, of course. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully we managed to achieve what we meant to do. And hopefully it's going to be the first of many, right?
Yes. If
right.
we are consistent, hopefully.
Yeah. So that's all for now. Bye, everyone.
Well, that was such a FIFA YouTube outro. I can't even...
going back to my roots. Peace. Peace.
Okay, let's close this.
Yeah.